The wind carried a faint chill as I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the house that used to feel like home. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment. The bouquet of daisies Clara's favorite felt heavier than it should, each petal a reminder of the daughter I hadn't seen in over a year. I was 78, and every step I took toward that door felt like a defiance of time, of distance, of the man who had built a wall between us. Clara, my only child, had always been my light. From the moment she was born, her laughter filled the empty spaces in my heart. We were inseparable through her childhood, her teenage years, even her early adulthood. I was there for her first heartbreak, her college graduation, her nervous excitement when she landed her first teaching job. But then came Daniel. Polished, confident, and charming. He swept into her life like a storm. I didn't see the clouds gathering until it was too late. Their wedding was a blur of joy and unease. Clara glowed in her white dress, but Daniel's smile never reached his eyes when he looked at me. I brushed it off as nerves, as the awkwardness of a new son-in-law. But months later, the calls stopped. The visits dwindled. And then, one evening, Daniel's voice came through the phone, cold and final. "It's best if you don't come around anymore. Eleanor, Clara needs space to build her new life." Space. The word cut deeper than any knife. Clara, my Clara, didn't contradict him. She didn't call to explain. She didn't reach out. I waited for weeks, then months, staring at my phone, hoping for a message that never came. My heart broke a little more each day, but I clung to the memories, her tiny hand in mine, her voice calling me Mama as we baked cookies in our cramped kitchen, her tears when her father passed. How could she let me go? I tried to respect their wishes. I sent letters, gifts for Clara's birthday, even a card when I heard they were expecting a child. None were answered. My friends urged me to move on, to let her go. But how does a mother let go of her child? The silence was a wound that wouldn't heal. And every night, I lay awake, wondering what I'd done wrong. But today was different. Today, I was done waiting. I'd driven 3 hours to their suburban home, unannounced, uninvited, with nothing but a bouquet and a heart full of hope. The house loomed before me, modern and pristine, with its white picket fence and manicured lawn. It was the kind of place Clara had always dreamed of. I wondered if she was happy here, if she missed me at all. My knees ached as I climbed the porch steps. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. What if Daniel answered? What if he turned me away again? Worse, what if Clara did? The thought nearly broke me, but I steeled myself. I was her mother. I had a right to see her, to know she was okay. The door opened before I could knock. A young woman stood there. Not Clara, but someone with her eyes. For a moment, I thought time had turned back. But then I saw the toddler clinging to her leg, a boy with Clara's curls. My breath caught. This was my daughter, older now, a mother herself. Mom. Clara's voice was a whisper, laced with shock and something else, guilt. Perhaps, or relief. Her eyes filled with tears, mirroring mine. Clara, I said, my voice breaking. I couldn't stay away anymore. She stepped forward, then stopped, glancing back into the house. I knew she was looking for Daniel. The air grew heavy with unspoken words, and I wondered if I'd made a mistake coming here. But then the toddler giggled, reaching for the daisies, and Clara's face softened. "Come in," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Please." I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The house smelled of lavender and baby powder, a mix of the familiar and the foreign. Clara led me to the living room, where toys were scattered across the floor. The toddler me grandson. I realized with a pang tugged at my skirt. Curious and unafraid. I knelt to his level, my arthritis protesting, and handed him a daisy. He grinned. And for a moment, I saw Clara in him. The Clara I'd lost. Where's Daniel? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. Clara's face tightened. He's at work. He doesn't know you're here. I nodded, understanding more than she said. We sat, the silence stretching between us, filled only by the toddler's babbling. I wanted to ask why she'd let him push me away, why she hadn't fought for me, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. I've missed you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter not the woman who'd shut me out, but the girl who'd needed me. I've missed you too, Mom, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know how to fix this. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Daniel's voice cut through the room, sharp and cold. Eleanor, what are you doing here? The air shifted, heavy with tension. I stood, clutching the daisies, ready to face the man who'd taken my daughter from me. But as I looked at Clara, at the fear and hope warring in her eyes, I knew this wasn't just about me. It was about her, about us, about the family we'd both lost and found again. Daniel stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His suit was crisp, his face a mask of controlled anger. The warmth I'd felt with Clara and her son vanished, replaced by a chill that settled in my bones. I tightened my grip on the daisies, their delicate stems a fragile anchor in the storm brewing before me. Clara, Daniel said, his voice low but edged with steel. Why is she here? Clara flinched, her hand slipping from mine. She stood, placing herself between us, as if shielding me or perhaps herself. She just showed up. Daniel. I didn't know. You didn't know? His eyes narrowed, flicking to me. And you thought it was okay to just let her in. I wanted to speak, to defend myself. But Clara's son-me grandson chose that moment to toddle over, clutching the daisy I'd given him. He looked up at Daniel, oblivious to the tension, and held out the flower. Pretty, he chirped. Daniel's expression softened for a split second, but it hardened again as he turned back to me. Eleanor, you need to leave. Now. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't move. I'd come too far to be turned away so easily. I'm here to see my daughter, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And my grandson. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is my house. My family. You don't get to decide when you're welcome. Your family. The words slipped out before I could stop them, sharp with years of pent-up pain. Clara is my daughter. Daniel. You can't erase that. Clara's eyes darted between us, her hands twisting together. Please, she whispered. Don't do this. Not in front of Ben. Ben. My grandson's name was Ben. The knowledge warmed me, even as the room grew colder. I knelt again, ignoring the ache in my joints, and smiled at him. Ben, do you like flowers? I asked, holding out another daisy. He nodded, his small fingers wrapping around the stem. Clara watched, her eyes glistening, and for a moment, I thought she might speak up. But Daniel stepped forward, his presence looming. Eleanor, I'm not asking again. Leave. I stood slowly, my gaze locked on his. I've lost a year with my daughter because of you, I said. I won't lose another moment. The room fell silent, save for Ben's soft humming as he played with the daisies. Clara's face was a mask of conflict, torn between her husband and the mother she'd pushed away. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her into my arms like I had when she was a child. But I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Clara, I said softly, I don't know what's happened between us, but I'm here now. I want to understand. I want to be part of your life again. Her lips parted, but no words came. Daniel's hand landed on her shoulder. Possessive. Controlling. She doesn't need you stirring things up, he said. We're fine without you. The words stung, but I saw the flicker of doubt in Clara's eyes. She wasn't as certain as he was. That flicker was enough to keep me standing there, refusing to back down. Daniel, Clara said finally, her voice barely audible. Let her stay? Just for a little while. His head snapped toward her, disbelief etched into his features. Clara, you can't be serious. I am, she said, stronger now. She's my mother. Ben's grandmother. She deserves to be here. The air crackled with tension. Daniel's face darkened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, the door to his study slamming behind him. Clara exhaled, her shoulders sagging, and I realized how much that small act of defiance had cost her. She turned to me, her eyes searching mine. I'm sorry, Mom, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to stand up to him. I stepped closer, my heart aching for her. You don't have to apologize, I said. Just tell me what's been going on. Why did you let him push me away? She glanced at Ben, who was now stacking blocks on the floor, oblivious to the weight of our conversation. It's complicated, she said. Daniel, he's not a bad person. He's just protective. He thought you were too involved, that you were holding me back from being the wife he wanted me to be. Her words were a knife to my heart. Holding you back. Clara, all I've ever wanted is for you to be happy. I know, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. But I didn't know how to balance it all. I didn't want to lose him. And I thought I could live without you. The admission hurt, but it was honest. I reached for her hand again, and this time, she squeezed back. You don't have to choose, I said. I'm your mother. I'll always be here, no matter what. Ben toddled over, holding up a block. Build, he demanded, and Clara laughed through her tears. We sat on the floor together, building a tower, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was home. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was only the beginning. Daniel wasn't going to let me back into their lives so easily, and Clara's courage was fragile, untested. I'd have to tread carefully if I wanted to stay. The afternoon slipped away in a blur of blocks and laughter. Ben's energy was infectious, his tiny hands guiding mine as we built towers only to knock them down with gleeful shrieks. Clara sat beside us, her smile tentative but real. And for those precious hours, it felt like the rift between us had never existed. But the shadow of Daniel's disapproval hung over the room, a reminder that this moment was fragile. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light through the living room windows, Clara glanced at the clock. He'll be back soon, she said, her voice tight. He had a meeting after work, but he doesn't like surprises. I nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. I don't want to cause trouble, I said, though the words tasted bitter. But I'm not ready to leave yet. Clara, not until we really talk. She hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. I know, Mom. I want that too. But Daniel, he's particular about how things are. He doesn't like change. Change. I raised an eyebrow. unable to hide my frustration. I'm your mother, not a change. I'm family. Clara's eyes dropped to the floor, and I regretted my tone. I reached for her hand, softening my voice. I'm not here to fight, sweetheart. I just want to understand. Help me understand. She took a deep breath, glancing at Ben, who was now engrossed in a picture book. It started small. She said, after we got married, Daniel wanted us to focus on building our life together. He said you were too present, that you called too often, visited too much. He thought it was unhealthy, that I needed to let go of my old life to fully embrace our new one. I listened, my heart sinking. I'd always been close to Clara, but I'd never thought of myself as overbearing. Had I been? The doubt crept in, but I pushed it aside. And you agreed with him? I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Not at first, she admitted. But he was so sure, so confident. He made it sound like it was for my own good. And I wanted to make him happy. I didn't want to lose what we were building. So I started pulling back. I stopped calling as much, stopped inviting you over. And then, when I got pregnant with Ben, things got worse. Worse how? I asked, my stomach tightening. Daniel became more controlling, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He wanted everything to be perfect, our home, our marriage, our family. He said you were a distraction, that your visits would stress me out during the pregnancy. I tried to argue, but he'd get so upset, and I was exhausted. It was easier to just let it go. The weight of her words settled over me. I'd spent a year imagining Clara had chosen to cut me out. But now I saw the truth. She'd been worn down, manipulated by a man who saw me as a threat. Anger flared, but I tamped it down. This wasn't about Daniel. Not entirely. It was about Clara, about helping her find her strength again. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Daniel was back, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He stopped short when he saw us, his eyes narrowing. You're still here, he said, his tone flat but laced with irritation. I am, I said, standing to meet his gaze. And I'd like to stay for dinner, if that's okay with Clara. Clara froze, caught between us. I hated putting her in this position, but I couldn't back down. Not now. To my surprise, she nodded. Yes, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Stay? Mom. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned to Clara. We'll talk later, he said, his voice low, and disappeared into the kitchen. The threat in his tone was unmistakable, and I saw the fear flicker in Clara's eyes. Dinner was tense, the clink of silverware the only sound breaking the silence. Ben, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered about his day, his small voice a lifeline in the strained atmosphere. I watched Clara, saw the way she kept her eyes on her plate, avoiding Daniel's gaze. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her she didn't have to live like this. But I knew I had to be careful. One wrong move, and Daniel would shut me out again. After dinner, Clara took Ben upstairs for his bath, leaving me alone with Daniel. He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, studying me like I was an intruder. You think you can just walk back into her life? He said, his voice low. You're not needed here, Eleanor. I met his gaze, unflinching. That's not for you to decide, I said. Clara is my daughter. Ben is my grandson. I belong here as much as you do. His eyes darkened, but before he could respond, Clara's voice called from upstairs. Mom, can you help with Ben's bedtime story? I seized the chance to escape, climbing the stairs with a lightness I hadn't felt in years. In Ben's room, Clara handed me a worn copy of Goodnight Moon, her fingers brushing mine. "He loves this one," she said, her voice soft. As I read to Ben, his small body curled against mine. I felt Clara watching us. There was a spark in her eyes, a glimmer of the daughter I'd raised strong, kind, and fiercely loving. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for her, for the life she deserved, free from fear and control. Bedtime with Ben was a small miracle. His soft breathing steadied as I read, his eyelids drooping until he was fast asleep, clutching the daisy I'd given him. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, watching us with a mix of tenderness and sorrow. I closed the book, setting it gently on the nightstand, and turned to her. "He's beautiful," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just like you were at his age." Clara's lips trembled, and she looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of Ben's blanket. "I didn't think you'd ever meet him," she admitted. "I wanted you to, but I didn't know how to make it happen." I reached for her hand, my heart aching at the pain in her voice. "You don't have to do this alone," I said. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." She nodded, but her eyes flickered toward the door, as if expecting Daniel to appear. The weight of his presence lingered, even in his absence. I wanted to ask more, to dig into the details of how things had spiraled so far, but I sensed she wasn't ready. Not yet. We moved to the guest room, where Clara insisted I stay the night. "It's late," she said, her tone apologetic. "You shouldn't drive back in the dark." I didn't argue. The thought of leaving now, after finally breaking through, was unbearable. As she handed me a stack of fresh towels, I noticed the strain in her movements, the way her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible burden. I wanted to pull her into my arms, to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew words alone wouldn't fix this. That night, I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, the house creaking around me. Memories flooded back: Clara's first steps, her gap-toothed grin, the way she'd cling to me during thunderstorms. How had we drifted so far apart? I thought of Daniel's cold eyes, his possessive grip on Clara's life, and my resolve hardened. I wouldn't let him take her from me again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Ben's laughter drifting from the kitchen. I followed it, finding Clara at the stove, flipping pancakes while Ben scribbled on a coloring book. The scene was so achingly familiar, a mirror of mornings we'd shared when Clara was a child, that I had to blink back tears. "Morning, Mom," Clara said, her smile hesitant but warm. "Want some coffee?" I nodded, settling at the table beside Ben. "You're up early," I said, ruffling his curls. "He's an early bird," Clara said, her voice lighter than it had been yesterday. "Just like you." The moment felt fragile, precious, but it shattered when Daniel entered the kitchen. His eyes flicked from me to Clara, his expression unreadable. "You're still here," he said, more a statement than a question. "I invited her to stay," Clara said, her tone firm despite the slight tremor in her hands. She set a plate of pancakes in front of Ben, avoiding Daniel's gaze. He didn't respond, just poured himself a coffee and sat at the far end of the table. The silence was suffocating, broken only by Ben's chatter about his coloring. I forced myself to eat, to act normal, but every bite felt like a challenge under Daniel's scrutiny. After breakfast, Clara suggested a walk to the park. "Ben loves the swings," she said, her eyes pleading with me to agree. I nodded, grateful for the chance to escape the house in Daniel's presence. The park was a short walk away, a small oasis of green in the suburban sprawl. Ben ran ahead, his laughter echoing as he made a beeline for the swings. Clara and I followed, settling on a bench nearby. The morning air was crisp, and for a moment, we just watched Ben, his joy a balm for the tension between us. "Mom," Clara said finally, her voice low, "I need to tell you something." I turned to her, my heart pounding. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Ben. "Daniel's not just controlling with you. It's everything. The way I dress, who I talk to, how I raise Ben. I thought it was love at first, him wanting to protect me, but now I'm not sure. I feel like I'm losing myself." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was both heartbreaking and infuriating. "Clara," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering inside. "You don't have to live like this. You're stronger than you know." She shook her head, tears welling. "I don't feel strong. I feel trapped. If I leave, I don't know what he'll do. He's not violent, but he's intense. He'd fight for custody of Ben, and I can't lose him." The fear in her voice was raw, real. I reached for her, pulling her into a hug. "You won't lose Ben," I said fiercely. "And you won't lose me. We'll figure this out together." As we sat there, holding each other while Ben laughed on the swings, I felt a spark of hope. Clara was scared, but she was opening up, trusting me again. It was a start, a crack in the wall Daniel had built around her. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I'd fight for my daughter, no matter what it took. The walk back from the park was quiet, save for Ben's chatter about the squirrels he'd chased. Clara pushed his stroller, her face pensive, while I walked beside her, my mind racing with her confession. She felt trapped, suffocated by Daniel's control, and the weight of that truth settled heavily on my shoulders. I wanted to fix it, to sweep her and Ben away to safety, but I knew it wasn't that simple. Clara needed to find her own strength, and I needed to be there to support her, not take over. When we returned to the house, Daniel was waiting. He stood in the living room, his arms crossed, his expression a mix of irritation and suspicion. "Where were you?" he asked, his tone sharp. Clara stiffened, her grip tightening on the stroller. "We went to the park," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "Ben needed some fresh air." Daniel's eyes flicked to me, then back to Clara. "You didn't tell me you were going out." "I didn't think I needed to," Clara said, a faint edge in her voice. It was small, but it was there a spark of defiance I hadn't seen in her before. I held my breath, waiting for Daniel's reaction. He stared at her for a long moment, then turned away, muttering something about work. The tension lingered, but Clara's small stand felt like a victory. I caught her eye and gave her a subtle nod, hoping she could see the pride in my expression. The rest of the day passed in a delicate balance. I helped Clara with Ben, reading him stories and playing with his toys, while Daniel kept his distance, retreating to his study or leaving for errands. Every moment with Clara and Ben felt stolen, precious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was biding his time, waiting for an excuse to push me out again. That evening, after Ben was asleep, Clara and I sat in the kitchen with cups of tea. The house was quiet, Daniel still out on some unspecified errand. I seized the chance to dig deeper. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice gentle, "what do you want? Not what Daniel wants. Not what's best for Ben, what do you want?" She stared into her tea, her fingers tracing the rim of the mug. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "I used to want a family, a home, a life with Daniel. But now, I feel like I'm living for him, not with him. I miss teaching. I miss my friends. I miss you. But leaving feels impossible. It's not impossible, I said, leaning forward. It's hard. Yes, but you're not alone. You have me, and I'll help you however I can. You deserve to be happy. Clara. Her eyes met mine, filled with a mix of hope and fear. What if he takes Ben? He's got money, a good job, a lawyer. I'm just me. You're not just anything, I said fiercely. You're Clara, my brilliant, kind, strong daughter. And Ben needs you as mother, not just a perfect house or a powerful father. We'll find a way. She nodded, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. I knew it wouldn't be easy to convince her, to help her see her own worth after years of Daniel's control. But I also knew I couldn't push too hard. She needed time, and I needed to be patient. The next morning, I woke to find Clara in the living room, staring at an old photo album I'd brought with me. It was filled with pictures of her childhood, her first bike ride, her high school graduation, our trips to the beach. She traced a finger over a photo of us baking cookies, her face soft with nostalgia. I forgot how happy we were, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't realize how much I'd lost. You haven't lost it, I said, sitting beside her. It's still here, in you, and we can have it again. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder, and for a moment, we were just mother and daughter again, no walls between us. But the moment was fleeting. Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, and Clara tensed, pulling away. He walked in, his eyes narrowing as he saw the album. What's this? He asked, his tone clipped. Just some old photos, Clara said, closing the album quickly. Mom brought it. Daniel's gaze shifted to me, cold and calculating. You're getting comfortable here, Eleanor, he said. Don't forget this isn't your home. The words were a challenge, a line drawn in the sand. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. I'm here for my daughter, I said, and I'll stay as long as she needs me. Clara's eyes widened, and I saw the conflict in her fear of Daniel's reaction, but also a spark of gratitude. Daniel didn't respond, just turned and walked away. But I knew this wasn't over. He was used to control, and I was a threat to that. I had to be careful, for Clara's sake and Ben's. But I wasn't leaving. Not this time. As the day wore on, I watched Clara closely, looking for signs of the strength I knew was there. Every small act of defiant speaking up, making decisions without checking with Daniel was a step forward. I didn't know how long I'd have before Daniel pushed back, but I was determined to help Clara find her way out, one step at a time. The days stretched into a week, each one a delicate dance around Daniel's disapproval. I stayed in the guest room, helping Clara with Ben, cooking meals, and sharing quiet moments that felt like reclaiming lost time. Clara's smiles grew more frequent, her laughter a little freer, but I could see the strain in her eyes whenever Daniel was near. He hadn't confronted me again, but his silence was louder than words. A storm brewing, waiting to break. One afternoon, while Ben napped and Daniel was at work, Clara and I sat in the backyard, watching the leaves fall. The air was crisp, the scent of autumn heavy around us. Clara held a mug of hot cider, her hands wrapped tightly around it, as if seeking warmth beyond the drink. Mom, she said, her voice hesitant. Do you think I'm weak? For staying with him? For letting things get this bad? The question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate. No, I said firmly. You're not weak, Clara. You're surviving. You've been trying to protect Ben, to keep your family together. That takes strength, even if it doesn't feel like it. She looked away, her eyes glistening. I don't know if I can do this anymore, she said. But I'm so scared. What if I leave and it's a mistake? What if I can't make it on my own? You won't be on your own, I said, reaching for her hand. You have me, and we'll figure it out together. You're stronger than you know. Clara, you always have been. She squeezed my hand, a small gesture that felt like a lifeline. I want to believe you, she said. I need time. Take all the time you need, I said. I'm not going anywhere. That evening, Daniel came home early, his mood darker than usual. He barely acknowledged me, his attention fixed on Clara. We need to talk, he said, his voice low but commanding. Clara glanced at me, her expression a mix of fear and resolve. Okay, she said, standing. Let's talk in the study. I watched them go, my heart pounding. I wanted to follow, to protect her, but I knew this was her battle. Instead, I busied myself with Ben, helping him build a fort out of blankets in the living room. His laughter was a welcome distraction, but my ears strained for any sign of trouble from the study. An hour later, Clara emerged, her face pale but composed. Daniel followed, his expression unreadable. Eleanor, he said, his voice cold. I think it's time you went home. Clara's eyes widened, and she stepped forward. No, she said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. She's staying. Daniel, I want her here. The air crackled with tension. Daniel stared at her, his jaw tight. But Clara didn't back down. This is my home too, she said, and I want my mother here. For a moment, I thought Daniel might explode, but he just nodded curtly and walked away. Clara turned to me, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and triumph. I did it, she whispered. I stood up to him. I pulled her into a hug, my heart swelling with pride. You did, I said, and you were amazing. The next few days were a turning point. Clara began to reclaim small pieces of herself wearing clothes she liked instead of what Daniel approved, calling an old friend, even talking about going back to teaching. Each step was small, but they added up, building a foundation for the life she wanted. I was there for every moment, cheering her on, but I knew the real test was coming. Daniel wasn't going to let go easily. One evening, as we sat down to dinner, Daniel dropped a bombshell. I've been offered a promotion, he said, his tone casual but his eyes fixed on Clara. It's in Chicago. We need to move by next month. Clara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Chicago, she said, her voice barely audible. You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now, he said, his tone dismissive. It's a great opportunity. For all of us. I saw the panic in Clara's eyes, the realization that this was another way for Daniel to control her, to isolate her even further. I wanted to speak, to challenge him, but I held back. This was Clara's moment. I need to think about it, she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear I knew she felt. We need to talk about what's best for Ben. And for me. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. The rest of the dinner passed in silence, the weight of his announcement hanging over us. Later, as we cleaned the kitchen, Clara turned to me, her expression resolute. I don't want to go, she said. I want to stay here, near you, near my friends. I want to start over, on my terms. Then we'll make it happen, I said, my voice firm. Whatever it takes. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of hope and fear. Clara was finding her strength, but Daniel was a force to be reckoned with. I didn't know what he'd do when he realized she was slipping out of his control, but I knew one thing: I'd be by her side, no matter what. The news of the potential move to Chicago hung over the house like a dark cloud. Clara was quieter than usual, her newfound confidence shaken by Daniel's announcement. I could see her wrestling with the decision, torn between her fear of defying him and her desire to reclaim her life. I wanted to push, to tell her to stand her ground, but I knew she needed to come to it on her own. One morning, while Daniel was at work, Clara took me to a small cafe in town. Ben sat in a high chair, happily munching on a muffin, while we sipped coffee and talked. The cafe was cozy, filled with the hum of conversation and the scent of fresh pastries, a stark contrast to the tension of the house. "I've been thinking about what you said," Clara began, her voice low, "about deserving to be happy. I want that, Mom. I want it for me and for Ben. But Chicago, it feels like another way for Daniel to control me." I nodded, letting her speak. "What do you want to do?" I asked. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on Ben. "I want to stay. I want to go back to teaching, to rebuild my life here. But I'm scared. If I tell Daniel no, he'll fight me. He always does." "He might," I said, keeping my tone gentle. "But you're not alone anymore. You have me, and we'll face whatever comes together." She smiled, a small, tentative thing, but it was enough. Over the next few days, I watched her take small steps toward independence. She reached out to her old school, inquiring about teaching positions. She reconnected with a friend from college, their laughter filling the house during a rare phone call. Each act was a rebellion, a reclaiming of the woman she'd been before Daniel. But Daniel wasn't blind to the changes. I caught him watching her, his eyes narrowing when she laughed or made decisions without consulting him. One evening, as we sat in the living room, he confronted her. "You've been different lately," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "Ever since your mother showed up." Clara stiffened, but she didn't back down. "Maybe I have," she said. "Maybe I'm remembering who I am." His eyes flicked to me, cold and accusing. "This is your doing, isn't it, Eleanor?" Filling her head with ideas, turning her against me. "I'm not turning her against anyone," I said, my voice steady. "I'm supporting my daughter. She deserves to make her own choices." Daniel's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Clara spoke. "This isn't about Mom," she said. "This is about me. I don't want to move to Chicago, Daniel. I want to stay here, with Ben, with my family." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging between us. Daniel stared at her, his expression a mix of shock and anger. "You're making a mistake," he said finally. "This promotion is for our future." "It's for your future," Clara said, her voice trembling but firm. "I need to think about mine. And Ben's." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "We'll talk about this later," he said, and stormed out of the room. The slam of his study door echoed through the house. Clara's hands were shaking, but she met my gaze, her eyes bright with determination. "I did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told him." "You did," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so proud of you." The next few days were tense, Daniel's mood darkening with each passing hour. He avoided me, but I could feel his resentment, his anger at losing control. Clara, meanwhile, grew stronger, her resolve solidifying. She met with a lawyer, quietly, to discuss her options. She started packing a bag, just in case. Her movements deliberate and calm. One night, as we sat in the guest room, Clara turned to me, her expression serious. "If I leave, will you come with me?" she asked. "Just until I get settled." "Of course," I said, my heart swelling. "I'll be there as long as you need me." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said, "but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I can do this." The next morning, Daniel left for work without a word, his silence more ominous than his usual barbs. Clara and I spent the day with Ben, playing in the backyard, trying to hold onto the fragile piece we'd found. But I knew it couldn't last. Daniel was planning something, and I had to be ready for Clara's sake, for Ben's, for the family we were rebuilding. The air in the house felt heavier as the days passed, Daniel's silence a growing threat. Clara was resolute, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the weight of what she was about to do. She'd made up her mind she wasn't going to Chicago, and she wasn't staying with Daniel. But leaving was a daunting step, and I knew she was bracing for his reaction. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Daniel came home late, his face a storm of barely contained anger. He didn't acknowledge me, his eyes fixed on Clara. "I spoke to the lawyer today," he said, his voice cold. "If you try to leave, I'll fight for full custody of Ben. You know I'll win." Clara's face paled, but she didn't flinch. "You can't scare me into staying," she said, her voice steady. "I'm done living like this. Daniel, I want a life where I'm not afraid to be myself." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might lash out. But he just turned and walked away, leaving a chilling silence in his wake. Clara's hands were trembling, but she met my gaze, her resolve unbroken. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said quietly. "I found a small apartment near the school. It's not much, but it's a start." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride and fear. "I'll help you pack," I said, "and I'll be there every step of the way." The next morning, we moved quickly, packing essentials while Daniel was at work. Clara's hands shook as she folded Ben's clothes, but her jaw was set, her eyes bright with determination. We loaded the car, Ben strapped into his car seat, oblivious to the weight of the moment. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house, wondering if Clara would ever return. The apartment was small but cozy, with sunlight streaming through the windows. Clara set Ben up with his toys, her movements purposeful, as if claiming the space as her own. I helped her unpack, the simple act of arranging dishes in the kitchen feeling like a victory. That evening, as we sat on the floor with Ben, Clara turned to me, her eyes shining. "Thank you, Mom," she said. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You did this," I said, squeezing her hand. "You found your strength. I just reminded you it was there." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Clara met with her lawyer, preparing for the inevitable custody battle. She started teaching again, her passion reignited as she stood in front of a classroom. Ben thrived, his laughter filling the apartment, and I stayed close, helping with childcare and offering support whenever Clara needed it. Daniel didn't give up easily. He called, sent messages, even showed up at the apartment once, his face a mask of controlled fury. But Clara held her ground, refusing to let him intimidate her. With each confrontation, she grew stronger, her fear giving way to a fierce determination to protect her son and her future. Months later, I sat in Clara's apartment, watching her and Ben bake cookies in their tiny kitchen. The scene was so like the ones from her childhood that my heart ached with joy. Clara was herself again, vibrant, confident, free. The custody battle was ongoing, but she faced it with courage, knowing she wasn't alone. As I watched them, I realized that my unannounced visit had been more than a desperate act. It had been a spark, igniting Clara's strength, rekindling our bond. We'd faced the darkness together and come out stronger. A family rebuilt not just on love, but on resilience and hope.